Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and an article out of the BBC says Libor, Bank of England implicated in secret recording, and we will play you that recording right now to give you an idea of the fact that Barclays manager has told the Libor submitter to lower his rate. So check this out.
The bottom line is you're going to absolutely hate this. We've had some very serious pressure from the UK government and the Bank of England about pushing our Libors lower. Okay.
So I'll push them below a realistic level where I think I can get money.
Absolutely. The fact of the matter is that we've got the Bank of England, all sorts of people involved in the whole thing.
So this is kind of a startling development. John, can you go into what's going on here, what this means?
Yeah, well, it's been pretty obvious from the start and get-go that the manipulation of the Libor rate was to, of course, help the central banks to push down the rates, the interest rates. The Libor rate is, of course, one of the most important rates, and it's called a London Interbank Offered Rate. Now, what that means is that it's the average of interest rates estimated by each of the leading banks in London that would be charged where it borrow from the other banks. Now, of course, that rate also implicates every single other interest rate that they have when it comes to your mortgage, your different loans. You have your car loans, your credit card loans, and so on. So it actually is manipulating all interest rates basically in that realm. Now, of course, I believe that interest rates have been. We have the Euribor, we have the Euribor. All of these interbank lending rates in the Eurozone and Norway and so on, I believe all of them have been manipulated in my point of view. I thought that from the get-go. And here, of course, we get clear evidence of the traders talking about how the pressure from, the Bank of England and from the English government to, push and trade so the interest rates gets put down artificially. And that's, of course, what they do all the time. Now, I've looked into something else that I believe is involved in this, and it's, of course, the English version of the Exchange Stabilization Fund, which is the Exchange Equalization account, which basically is, their slush fund where all their money lies, their SCRs, their gold.
We've talked a little bit about
bonds.
this in the past. We've kind of alluded to it, but we haven't really gone into it much.
But I do believe that is used as, the black transactions between the banks, to hide it off the books, to make sure that it gets covered as good as possible. Now, of course, this phone conversation is leaked. We don't really know exactly where it came from, but it become very apparent that these guys, had pressure from above, from the Bank of England, from of course, the government in the UK to manipulate these interest rates to keep them down artificially.
Well, this is something that we've been called a conspiracy theorist for so long for talking about. We've talked so often about not only just how the Bank of England kind of pulls the strings like the Federal Reserve pulls the strings in the States and so on, etc., these central banking giants, but also the vast manipulation, the vast artificial markets, the fact that they are manipulating everything, they've got their hands in everything, and they are, in many senses, trying to push people into debt slavery, trying to push the markets into a breaking point, and how that benefits them. So can you go a bit further into how that benefits them?
Well, how it benefits them is, of course, when you move whatever things, markets or interest rates or whatever is in a certain direction, they could, of course, have their derivatives attached to that, betting on a move in those markets. They can make money that way. They have their options. Most of these Wall Street people or people that are the high bankers, they don't really ever trade in stocks or bonds. They actually trade in derivatives like option puts, forwards, and then, of course, all these other derivatives that they create out of all these different products, and then they sell them. That's how they make most of their money. And, of course, it's highly manipulative. There's, of course, the London whale, that was the reason why the Libor scandal came up in the first place. The trader that said that, I'm sorry, I was implicated in, putting out these trades to manipulate the Libor rate. Now, the problem with this is there's so much manipulation on other sides. For example, JP Morgan, how they've been cornering different markets and do naked short selling where they put out sales to manipulate the price down and then they pull away the sales.
Not the kind of naked I like.
No, definitely not. So they're constantly, working on, manipulating commodities, whatever they want, so they can make money on it. That's their game plan. And of course, now they have algorithms that, they put forward that could trade on any moves in the markets. And as we've seen, and I think these algorithms going to be the downfall too, because what's going to happen is they are set to trade a certain way. Well, they're going to all flush the markets with, for example, margin calls, which means that you have to sell off in order to cover your losses.
Yeah.
Just wait and mark my words, what's going to happen here is all this manipulative behavior from the banks are going to come bite them really hard and be their downfall, basically.
How do you think it's going to come back to bite them? Exactly how do you mean?
Well, over time, when you manipulate markets far enough, this was what happened with long-term capital management, is they believe that they were the gods. They found this perfect trading scheme. They always made money, but then the problem is everybody else catches up with them and then uses the same trades. Well, now everybody's using those trades, and then suddenly it just breaks apart where everybody's just selling, and the whole system collapses with it.
These guys, in order to benefit themselves, constantly shoot themselves in the foot, don't they? I mean, the way that they continuously manipulate things, the way they continuously conspire, always comes up and catches up to them eventually.
Of course, they always will. But the problem is they're getting away with it now, and they're trying to do it for as long as they can. And then, of course, they move on to a different scheme. What can they manipulate next and go into? That's today's trading and financial markets are so artificial to that. There's almost no real moves left in the markets. Of course, now there is people exiting out of the markets. The baby boomers are getting their investments from all their stocks and bonds and so on, and they want their money because they're retiring. Now that's going to be a huge issue because the banks like to sell off at a certain point and have idiots buying it. There's no more idiots left to buy it, and then of course all these baby boomers are selling their assets. Who's going to buy it? I believe the central bank is going to step in. The Fed, the Bank of England. Of course, in Japan they've been buying stocks. Directly, so I think they're gonna step in and try to buy and manipulate. Keep the stock exchanges artificially up that way, and just blatantly, be right up front. We'll buy whatever we can to keep us from surviving. And then of course they're gonna end up, the markets are starting to go down again. Well, what can we buy now? Oh, we gotta buy all the stocks of the businesses, and then of course they sell all these businesses. They buy all these businesses, and suddenly at one point, who knows, if they continue to manipulate, there might just be a monopoly where the central banks owns every asset available.
Well, this monetary talk after a while tends to be a bit robotic, and the sad part is that individuals are affected by this.
Yeah.
And can you kind of just go into how individuals are affected by this specific case?
With the manipulation, of course, the pension holders, they have all their bond investments and so on.
Sure.
They are getting hit because they're getting manipulated interest rates that they're earning money from.
Yeah.
It's massive amounts of losses that was involved in this, of course, that they kept them artificially down when they should have been higher.
Yeah.
That's a massive amount of losses. We're talking billions,
Yeah.
probably almost in the trillions worldwide of what this manipulation have happened. So all of these, holders of what's getting manipulated, they could have had, a gain of some sort or whatever they could have had in a positive. That has been lost, a lot of it. So, of course, people have lost out a lot of money because of this pure manipulation, blatant manipulation from the governments and the central banks.
Well, just to kind of close it off first, I'm just going to mention that this is precisely why we talk so often about how the fundamentals are off the table in the monetary system and the markets, because things are so manipulated. You can't put a date on things. You just know it's going to go down. You just know it's going to crash. But going off of that, we need to bring people a bit of a solution. How can they avoid getting caught in the crosshairs of this?
Well, of course, this is our opinion, but in my opinion, stay out of paper. Paper is your number one enemy in today's markets. It's always been at the point where they start issuing and going into massive amounts of debt. That's always collapsed any civilization. So I know a lot of people are holding this debt. I talked to not a financial advisor, the guy that sells the product to the financial advisors. I talked to him recently, and he was telling me, they're frustrated because they don't know even what to sell anymore to, the people that, especially the baby boomers and so on, that are trying to, exit their money out of the markets. And they're afraid, even for all this debt to, collapse at any moment. So they don't really know, like, they're very frustrated. They have no clue really what's going on. It's a crazy world out there. That's what you get from people that are up there that knows what they're doing. So I would say, of course, the natural way of having a wealth insurance, your food insurance and so on. Because what's going to happen when this whole thing comes down, there's measures in place to freeze your assets completely, like in the United States, in Canada and other places. And of course, during the 2008 crash, they didn't freeze money market funds, which is, how money moves around now. They have that capability because they work with BlackRock, one of the massive fund distributors out there. They of course don't hold that money directly for their customers, but they do, move it around in different portfolios.
Sure.
But now the problem is they worked with, of course, the government, and the head of BlackRock has talked to certain people and said that they can freeze these accounts now. So that's the last step of what they could do, is because that was what really caused a massive issue, and the exchange stabilization fund was used to prop up the money market funds. We talked about that if you go and look at our video about the exchange stabilization fund. It was purposely used to make sure that didn't collapse, because it was so close to the brink of one of the most important funds that deals with currency and money to collapse. So you just gotta make sure you are well diversified, as much out of these dangerous systems as possible. We talked about having your own property. Make sure that you have your gold and silver,
your sound money
supply, your food supply.
It's important to note that it comes down to not just insuring yourself with sound money, but of course self-responsibility. Be able to take care of yourself, be able to take care of your family, be able to break free from any collectivist enforcement, because in the end you can't, through involuntary coercion of a collective, get out of the situation. It perpetuates. It's Hegelian, and you need to note that you must have sound money. You must be able to take care of yourself, and you have to be able to understand this information, which is quite basic, but it's made difficult just so that they can confuse people and keep them away from actually learning about it. It's really not that difficult. And if people are able to take care of themselves, if people are able to insure themselves, get off of the centralized system, then people can actually prevail quite well out of this situation. They just have to pull themselves out of the victimization, which is pushed on them due to their ignorance of the subject matter at hand.
Yeah, well, what they plan for is, when all hell breaks loose, they have martial laws in their eyes, and they're ready.
Absolutely.
It's all, the evidence is all there. The
plan's been in the playbook for
that
a long
they
time.
bought in the United States to, protect, like, Department of Homeland Security. You, of course, have here, and we've seen it firsthand here in Winnipeg, where they bought this massive, the police bought this massive, car, and they're saying, it's for, multi-casualty, like, shootings or whatever.
Well, they're preparing in many ways. Their agenda is obvious. They've been planning it for a long time, and it's up to us as individuals to make sure that we protect ourselves in many different ways, both physically and, of course, monetarily. So I think that it's important to also just quickly point out, as we always do in our videos, that fiat currency is printed out of thin air. It's devalued by its very being, and it creates debt and inflation, and that catches up to us eventually. It always crashes, always has, always will, and we're almost at the 1,000th year anniversary of the implementation of fiat currency in 1024 AD in China, and you'd think we'd learn in that time, but apparently not. But you can learn, you can break free from that, and maybe we can just be that change we wish to see in the world. But don't look for others to do it for you. You have to do it yourself as a free individual. So thanks for going into this for us, John, and we'll get back to you with much more. Check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially in these times when we are getting so heavily censored by YouTube. They're demonetizing all our content, and we need your help to stay afloat and be able to keep this operation up and running. You can
dangerous to tell the truth.
Absolutely, and you can also check the address for Bitcoin in the description in the comments, as well as on the screen for you to scan, if you please. It's going to be over John's head here. And also check our link in the description in the comments as well for the Red Pill Expo, where you can see people like J. Edward Griffin, Robert Kiyosaki, Ty Bollinger, James Corbett, Lord Moncton speak, and of course you can meet us if you want, and it'll be in Bozeman, Montana in June. So check those tickets out, buy some tickets, you won't want to miss this, and we'll be back at you with much more. This is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth,
be the change.